Welcome to the England Rugby Pod. Thanks for downloading the first episode of Season 2. England are back in action following a dramatic exit at the 2019 Rugby World Cup final, but the best is yet to come. You're listening to the England Rugby Pod, the rugby podcast that believes England will win the World Cup in 2023. Hey guys, it's still us. We're back. Welcome to the England Rugby Pod. We've had some time off. We've had some reflection time, but we've decided, Six Nations starts next week. It's about time we got back on the airwaves and brought you some thoughts and some of our special brand of analysis. So of course I'm joined, as you'd expect, by Dan. Hi mate.
Hello mate. It was a dark few months, but it was the time off. I've missed it. I must admit I have missed it, but equally after the final disappointment, which I don't mean disappointment in the England team, just a disappointment in result. I think we probably needed that time.
We did. We needed that reflection time. But there's been a lot of people on Twitter, particularly, kind of calling for us to get back to our special brand of rose-tinted, unfounded positivity where England is concerned.
Awesome.
I think it's safe to say we don't plan to disappoint.
Well, we don't plan to disappoint. I have a few questions that will seem negative, but because we're going to be here throughout the Six Nations, everyone's going to realise that my love and my commitment to England rugby has not wavered 1 inch. If anything, it's grown.
Well, I mean, it's 2023, right? This is the England Rugby Pod, the rugby podcast that believes England will win the World Cup in 2023. We've said it all along.
100%. Can I ask a quick question before we carry on?
Please do.
When we did our Christmas dinner, was it either you or Lucy's Andy's wife, for those who don't know, who was my Secret Santa?
I don't know what you got, mate. So
I got the Eddie Jones autobiography.
Ah, yeah, that was Lucy.
Yeah, I thought I knew it would be from you. At the time I couldn't bring myself to read it, but I started reading it now, and it's quite interesting.
Oh, I've not read it myself, but I've basically just gone completely off rugby for a few months, but it's difficult to ignore what's going on now. Obviously, with Six Nations, we're going to get into that. There's been a few changes. We're going to get into that mostly next week once we really kind of get on with the Six Nations episodes. Today is more about just catching up on the last few months, setting the scene for what's to come. And yeah, I think we're on for a good tournament. Probably important to point out now, we're not planning to do a weekly episode for the next 4 years. I think we would struggle to keep that up, and so let's not make commitments now that we can't maintain. But we're definitely going to cover the big tournaments, autumn internationals, summer tours. Obviously, there's a Lions tour coming up next year, so all the big rugby events we're going to cover, and then obviously it'll be a case of slotting things in as and when they're needed. And we'll see where things are as we close in on that 2023 World Cup. But we are really looking ahead to that one.
Yes, yeah.
But yeah, it's about the here and now, and right here, right now, it's all about Six Nations. And as you say, despite a disappointing result in the final, it was a hell of a World Cup campaign. I don't mind admitting that we were very nearly absolutely spot on about this England team. So
here's my point. If you look back at the World Cup, like you have to say, in theory, you have to say South Africa were the best team. But actually, if South Africa hadn't cheated, and you look back on the World Cup fairly, you had to say England were the best team in that World Cup.
I don't disagree with you. I think people, were England beaten by the better side? Did the better team win
on the day for sure?
On the day, but I think
I mean, that's a World Cup, though. We can't.
Yeah, 100%. Like, that's how World Cups are won and lost, and that's ultimately what matters, and that's what the history books will say. But South Africa utilised a very basic game plan that shouldn't have worked, but it did.
Yeah.
And is that a worry? Yes. It is, but as I say, it's in the past now. There's nothing we can do about it. There's certainly plenty of time over the course of the next 4 years to deal with situations and to kind of work out how do you deal with something like that. But yeah, bottom line is, and you could argue that maybe South Africa kind of went out and they had multiple game plans in mind, and they tried the first one and it worked. So they were like, well, let's not fix it. So maybe things would have been different had England dealt with the scrum. But at that level and a World Cup final, you shouldn't have one team that can be that dominant in the scrum, and they were. And that's the problem, and ultimately that's what cost England the World Cup. But in terms of kind of the sort of the complete game, who's the better team, who had the better squad, I would argue that England still. Unfortunately, it all went wrong on the day.
It did go wrong on the day. South Africa.
But South Africa deserved that win on that day for the way that they played versus the way that England played. I'm not taking anything away from them other than the World Cup because they cheated.
Yeah, well, I mean, it was disgraceful. It was almost as bad as like the Lance Armstrong doping thing within cycling. But
yeah, I mean, I'm not sure how they cheated, but you said they did, so I'm going with that.
yeah. I also haven't figured out how they cheated, but I'm sure I will with enough analysis. But so we believe England are going to win the World Cup in 2023, 100%.
Yeah.
But the here and now. First question. Is Eddie the right man to lead us to 2023?
Yeah, I think so. Whether he'll stick around, because when's he's contracted till next year?
2021, I believe.
I think it would be a mistake to bring someone in for two. I think you need 4 years. Look what Eddie Jones did with a 4-year campaign. He got us to a World Cup final where, because of the way that they played on the day. And, he might have a part to play in the preparation. But the point is that despite all the criticism that came throughout the course of that 4-year period, he created a team that had highs and lows but peaked for a World Cup. And that's what you need. And I worry that if we have him for 2 more years and then we bring someone else in, you're only giving them 2 years to do that. And I think if you look at the Eddie Jones tenure, at the end of year 2, England were on a downward spiral, not an upward one, having had a peak. So... I hope that he's the man for the job to go all the way through, and I like what he did with this England side, what he's done so far, and I think he's basically been given. When you consider how similar the team could look, whether it will or not, we'll see. And he's obviously very good at finding talent, and there may be lots of changes between now and 2023. But the vast majority of the guys that made a World Cup final last year could theoretically make the 2023 World Cup. So there's a lot of talent and a lot of experience that he could be taking through the next 4 years, bolstered obviously by the kind of clever little finds that he makes. So yeah, I think so. What about you? Do you feel the same?
No, I 100% agree. I want Eddie to lead us to 2023. I think Eddie's a great coach. Even with this squad, which we're not really going to go into today, we'll go in next week. But even with the squad, I still sometimes think, how have you left that player out? Yeah. But I still have nothing but faith in Eddie, and I hope he is our coach for 2023.
And I think, the thing that we've probably learnt over the last 4 years is that Eddie Jones makes decisions that we don't necessarily, and we've talked about it a lot, but makes decisions that we don't necessarily understand, but there is method behind the madness. Whether that be leaving out a player. I mean, take Alex Don Brandt, for example. Huge amounts of speculation about whether he's going to make the England squad. He didn't. Lots of people going, what the hell's going on? I mean, we don't know what's going on there. Eddie might have said to him, I need you to keep getting game time, so I'm not going to take you to the training camp. But I'm not necessarily, is the squad that's been announced, is that now set in stone? Or is that just the training squad and the Six Nations squad gets announced this week?
So that's the training squad. The 34 is the training squad.
So we're going to see potentially changes this coming week.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know how many leave. I can't remember how many go into. My brain is not as rugby focused.
I think it's 31. I think you take a 31 man to the Six Nations. I mean, my big worry, again, we're kind of digressing into talking about the Six Nations squad, which, as we say, we're going to deal with next week. But the big kind of missing link, if you like, with Billy being injured, seems to be the lack of a number 8. Which is perhaps where people are even more surprised about the Don Brandt situation, because it appears that he's going to have to play a flanker at the back. Is that a worry when you consider that we lost a World Cup final because we weren't physically kind of on par with the opposition, to kind of intentionally?
It's a surprise, but I had an interview with Eddie, so I kind of get where he's coming from, saying without Billy there, you just have to change the whole dynamic of the back row, and you still need the carriers, but you look elsewhere. So I think we'll look. I think our carrying forwards will mainly be looking at the front 5, and when you've got the likes of Mako, Marrow,
Kyle
Sinclair, Genji, like any of them.
Yeah,
I think that's where he'll look at the carrying, and the back row, he'll be looking at a very different dynamic. I am still surprised by it, but like I say, there's always decisions that have amazed me, like the Don Armand saga that's gone on for years. That
Danny
now,
Cipriani.
Yeah, the Danny Cipriani, all that hasn't yet. Eddie's produced an incredible team. I am going to say this now: England are the best rugby team in the world at the moment.
In Eddie, we trust.
We do trust. But, right, I'm now going to play devil's advocate for a bit. So, we've had Brexit, we've had Mexit, now we've got Sexit. So, Saracens have been kicked out of the Premiership. Now, I have done a bit of maths here, and I reckon with Saracens, if you look at the main England players for Saracens and then players in Saracens who are on the fringe, there are 17 Saracens players who can be talked about within the England squad. That's 17 people. They are now going to leave. They're going to leave the Premiership. Whether all those players leave Saracens, we don't know. So 17 players who you can talk about in the same breath when you're talking about England are there. So having come out of the World Cup as arguably the best performing team and looking the best in the world, you've got 17 Saracens players. That's surely going to affect this Six Nations, is it not?
Is this Six Nations too early for it to have an impact?
Possibly, arguably. Okay,
so, Jeremy, are we going to see these guys come out and perform based on the fact that they haven't gone down yet?
Yeah.
And obviously, in the case of Sarries, prior to the most recent announcement, they thought that they were just going to get away with starting from minus 34 points or whatever it was. So they've obviously been playing hard to make sure that didn't happen, and it looked like that was going to be the case. So I would argue that it's probably, yes, the announcement, there's a psychological thing, and maybe that has an impact. But in terms of what not playing in the Premiership is going to do, we're not going to find out at this year's Six Nations. If they all stay with Saracens, I don't see how they stay with Saracens, because let's not forget that they've still got to deal with the salary cap issue, and the salary cap's lower in the Championship. So I don't see how it's possible unless all the players say, yeah, we'll take a massive pay cut.
Yeah,
knowing that the following year, assuming they come back up, which I'm sure they would then still have to be on a pay cut. So I can't see them all staying. But I don't think it's going to play a part.
No, I think a lot will go out on loan, do what a why am I forgetting names? He hasn't been picked in the England squad. The back row, the Newcastle guy, who's absolutely immense. Mark Wilson. Yes. Sorry, Mark Wilson. You're an awesome player. But he, on loan sale this year, going back to Newcastle next year, because Newcastle will come up. I suspect a few will do that.
Yeah. They're still going to have to deal with the salary cap issue. Although actually, it's not their salaries that's the issue, is it? It's the investment in their private businesses and all the rest of it. We won't go into it today, but so it's not just what they get paid in as salary. It's the rest of the agreement.
Which is exactly. That's not good, because it's hard to navigate it all. But
I did read that there's a number of French teams who are obviously putting the feelers out, and I did read that they would invoke the extraordinary circumstances clause in the you can't play for England if you play outside England because of this situation. So we might find that some of them, even if it is on loan, go to France, and maybe they'll be like, go to France, earn a shit ton of money to make up for what you're not going to get when you come back.
Well, yeah, good for you. And actually, like you say, this Six Nations might be a bit soon. I suspect there'll be a lot on loan. I suspect there'll be some other deals going on. Some who perhaps only signed 1 year contracts elsewhere, and then maybe look to come back. But they will need to get rid of some players, and some will go for sure. But I mean, that's fine.
It might be great for the Premiership because you're spreading some of that talent out. I mean, how that impacts England will remain to be seen. But don't forget the other thing is that this is a post World Cup Six Nations, and they're always quite interesting ones because everyone's making wholesale changes. England probably making some of the least changes, which is probably one of the main reasons, apart from the fact that they're the best team in the world, why they're the bookies' favourite. But lots of wholesale changes being made. It's very unlikely that all these changes are just going to gel on day one. And ultimately we judge teams on performances. So sometimes it's easy to kind of to miss what impact these things might be having because the team's winning. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, so England go out and win a Grand Slam, and everyone's saying, "Oh, look, they're absolutely fine," but maybe their opposition it was massively under par compared to the previous Six Nations, for example.
Well, I think England still have a good chance, but again, so say a lot of wholesale changes. I mean, if we look at England rugby, the two major changes with England rugby is coaching wise. So we've had Matt Proudfoot come in as forwards coach because Steve Borthwick will be joining up with Leicester. Mm-hmm. I believe that's after the Six Nations. I'm not entirely sure. I don't know enough about Matt Proudfoot to say. I mean, I know he was part of Rassie Erasmus' South Africa team in the forwards, so that can't be a bad thing.
Well, exactly.
That's great. But the one I really, really like is Simon Amor, the old England Sevens coach and England Sevens player, coming in as the attack coach. I think that's brilliant.
Yeah, I mean, it'll be very interesting to see what he does with a team that I felt had become a real attacking threat, as they showed against New Zealand in the semis. So it wasn't. It's not like England were kind of desperate for some sort of inspiration in attack because it didn't exist. They're already a strong attacking side. So the forwards is where I think great. I don't know much about the selections that have been made, but great that we've got someone coming in who can offer that sort of that sevens edge in attack. But actually, we've got guys who can do a job there already. They need quick ball, and that comes from the forwards. And so it'll be really interesting to see whether, as you say, look at what South Africa were able to do to England in the final, up front. If he can get anything like that out of an England pack and turn them into a really dominant, front eight, win England a lot of ball, then we get to see what the boys can already do out back. But certainly I have no objection to improvements.
Yeah, no, I think it's good. I think Proudfoot, like you say, with the pack, I think that's huge. Simon Amor, our attack is brilliant, but I think adding him will just add that extra dimension that can just a bit of spark. Because Simon Amor is attack. He's a sevens player through and through, a great sevens player. Great sevens coach from what I see. I don't know enough about sevens, but from what I've seen. So I think they're brilliant appointments. Steve Borthwick going off to Leicester as head coach. Yeah, I kind of get it, but I don't think it's a bad thing to have a change. I think Steve Borthwick's done a great job. But
yeah, and he's obviously worked closely with Eddie for a long time. So I'm sure it'll be disappointing to have him go, but it makes sense. And like you say, he's going over there as head coach, and that's a hell of a step up.
Yeah, exactly.
Future England coach?
Who? Steve Borthwick? Yeah. Not yet.
No. Future.
Yeah, as in I can't see it yet. As in I appreciate not yet. He needs to prove himself with a really shit Leicester team. So that's another point I wanted to bring up actually. So looking at the Premiership, so then this is going to be my last bit of negativity, but something looking at the Premiership at the moment, typically the England team has been picked based upon teams who are within the sort of top 4, top 5. Well, Saracens would be if it wasn't for points deduction, but they've got their own stuff going on, which we've mentioned. But then Leicester, Quins and Wasps. Sorry, mate. Sorry, I don't mean to mug off Quins. Sorry, mate. But Leicester, Quins and Wasps are actually doing pretty poor right now. So if it hadn't been for Saracens, you've got to look at Worcester down as very potential relegation suspects if it hadn't been for Saracens doing that. And within that, you've got Wasps, Quins, Leicester, Saracens. So you've got those 4 teams. The current England squad of 34, 16 of them are from those 4 clubs.
Yeah.
So 16 of them are at either underperforming clubs or a club that is in just the weirdest position in English rugby ever. But could that potentially have effect on the England team?
Well, it's an interesting one because this isn't they were performing bad. They've performed pretty badly over the last couple of years.
What are we talking, Leicester here? Or?
Well, just all of those teams.
Yeah, I mean, Wasps
maybe not bottom of the table, but
maybe not lived up to their reputation.
Yeah, I mean, Wasps had a poor starts maybe, and then they kind of come back, and they're very solid middle of the table teams, but they haven't looked sensational for a long time, and yet you got an England side heavily dominated by players from these teams who step it up. So it almost feels like a lot of these players they're able to kind of separate club and country. And I don't know whether it's just that they gel better together as an England team than they do in their club sides. I don't know whether it's maybe following a World Cup, they're away from their clubs for a long time. That obviously that's something to bear in mind. So they've been away from the clubs for prolonged periods of time with training camps and then the World Cup itself. Does that impact the performance of those sides? Should it be the case now that they're all back together again? I don't know. It's a difficult one. But again, I think we just need to see things kind of settle, don't we? And we need to get this Six Nations done. And then see where things go. We need to know what's happening with Saris. Are a lot of these teams thinking, well, hold on, all of these top world-class players who are clearly not going to go and play in the Championship, are they about to come and take my job? Because there's that to consider as well. It's not just France who can make bids on these players. If they have to go elsewhere, you could have a number of these other teams, especially the struggling sides, Leicester, Quins, Wasps. If they start taking players from Saris, whether it's on loan or permanent, the people who are currently in those positions are going to be going, well, that's my shot gone. So what does that do to an England camp?
Yeah. So it's good. So, I mean, I said that as much to play devil's advocate, because if you look at Leicester in the World Cup, George Ford was one of our best players in the World Cup. He was absolutely spectacular. So
George Ford's a bit of an anomaly anyway, though, don't forget, because he's one of those players that, despite Leicester's poor form, he still stood out as being excellent in the Premiership. So but there was also Johnny May and Manu Tuilagi. So despite their poor season, the Leicester players performed amazingly for England. So I personally don't think even I'm the one who brought it up. I personally don't think it's going to be a major issue, but it's something to bear in mind. I mean, because if you looked at it, if you hadn't watched any rugby, you came and you looked at form from World Cup and things, you'd look and be like, England are going to walk this Six Nations, but England probably have a lot going on behind the scenes, a lot more than the other nations. And I know everyone will say like a lot of the other nations have made changes. Like you've got Andy Farrell come in, Wayne Pivac come in like as new coaches and things, but they've like Ireland and Wales, maybe not Wales, but Ireland was shit in the World Cup. I mean, they can only go forward. Wales are just Welsh, so whatever. But this is the big unknown, isn't it? Though this is why we need the Six Nations to kick off. We need to see we need to see what's actually going on, because we can speculate about what the psychological impact of various things are, what's that going to have on the England side and how they perform, and the answer is we just don't know until we see it. They're going to be doing their thing. They're not going to be talking about it in the media. We're going to find out, next weekend when they play France. I don't think it's going to have an impact because, as I say, apart from anything else, I think it's too soon to see the impact of all of this. But it could do. You're right, and it's going to be very interesting to kind of witness what happens. And I suppose at that point we'll be in a position to then go, what are the concerns here and how do they deal with it?
Okay, yeah, no, completely, and that's the thing. It's so unknown, and we're talking in generalizations massively here. Next week we'll go more into the squad and more into the team because it'll obviously be announced. So, so first question for you: what is a good result this Six Nations for England? Everything in mind. What's a good Six Nations for England?
A Grand Slam.
That's a good one.
It has to be. I mean, obviously it's a good one, but I think
what's a bad one?
To be honest, I think losing a game.
So if we don't win the Grand Slam, but we still win the Six Nations, is that a bad comeback?
No, of course it's not. But then who did we lose to and why and how did it come about?
Yeah.
So I think they've got to be going into this going, look, we're World Cup finalists. We beat the world champions convincingly in a World Cup semi-final. Compared to the other home nations, we outperformed all of them, both in terms of the result and the actual performances themselves, bar the final. We're making less changes than most. We have an incredibly experienced squad, and I think you have to be going into this Six Nations saying, looking at the oppositions. Are there any games in this Six Nations that we would consider to be acceptable losses? And the answer for me is no. So I
agree.
I think the minimum expectation is a Grand Slam.
Yeah. So I think
caveated with the fact that we don't know what all these other teams and their various changes, what they're going to translate into. But from England's point of view, going into the Six Nations, it has to be unbeaten, and we'll come up with excuses if we have to further into the competition.
Yeah, so that's I think that's exactly it. It will be interesting to see what like how we perform. I believe if we need to win the Six Nations. If we don't win it, it's a bad one. If we have a loss, depending on the circumstances, can potentially let it go because I can't remember the exact fixtures, but we've got some bad ones with regards to who we've got away, don't we? So firstly, coming to that, France away, is that a dangerous match?
I mean, you have to bring out the old, which France will turn up thing, don't you? But France is a very young squad. We know that can be dangerous in any team. They've all got something to prove. But will they will they come together as a team? Is there something fundamentally missing from French rugby, at the elite level that just means that these players, as good as they might be as individuals, just don't perform? Or is it absolutely going to gel, and in which case we come away from that game going, okay, fair enough, France is a serious team that we need to watch out for. This is the other thing. Eddie's very good at preparing the team for the game in front of them, apart from the World Cup final, apparently. And with all the changes going on post the World Cup, it's very difficult to know what that team looks like and therefore how to best prepare for it. So we could get caught napping. It's just very difficult to call, I think. But yeah, France could well be dangerous. I'm not sure that necessarily playing in France is the problem. That hasn't really been an issue for a while. But
the problem with France is they have got this is always the case, but now I'd say probably as much ever, they have got such unbelievable talent. How they manage to screw that up every time they hit the pitch is beyond me. But
I mean, the France game's massive, don't forget, because of the game that got cancelled during the World Cup. England against France. That never happened. So they're going to have a point to prove. They're going to want to say, England made a World Cup final, but we never got our chance to derail them. This is our chance to show what could have been. Not that it would have made a difference at that stage. I don't think. I think the cancellation of the game resulted in the same result. Anyway, didn't it? Or would France winning have put them through top?
I don't. Do you know what, mate? I can't even remember. I don't think it would have. Overall, I don't think
they didn't lose any other games, though, did they? But they beat Argentina narrowly and probably shouldn't have, didn't they, early on? So
if France had won, I think it would have been one of those where actually a France win would have made us. They would have won the group, but then we would have actually arguably had an easier run-in.
Yeah.
But, it's hard to know. And South Africa beat us on the day in the final, like having cheated. Would they have cheated if we'd met them earlier on? Who knows?
Well, maybe not, exactly. France in France, the in France part isn't a massive concern. Scotland in Scotland, it shouldn't be a problem, but you never know with Scotland, do you? This is like
we need to beat the fucking Scots.
Yeah. Well, they've held on to, they've retained the or won the Calcutta Cup for the last couple of years. So we need it back. It needs to come back to its home at HQ. So that has to be a convincing win. Ireland just looked a shadow of their former selves during the World Cup. So and despite that, even when people were still claiming that they were potential World Cup contenders, World Cup, finalists, England still convincingly beat them in all of the sort of build-up in the last Six Nations. That should just continue. Wales obviously made lots of changes, but we got them at Twickenham, so that should be a win. And Italy. So England have to be going out there thinking this is our better draw, isn't it? Because we have Wales and Ireland at home.
Yeah.
France, Scotland, and Italy away. It's when we've got Ireland in Dublin and Wales in Cardiff that it becomes more of a, you never know, because both those teams have the potential to do something.
Yeah, exactly. If we win a week today, we're Grand Slam winners. Actually,
you think France is the one?
I think France will be the toughest game.
Okay.
Actually, screw that. I'm going to change it. We will win the Grand Slam easily.
I feel like they've got the players. I mean, there's also a lot of injuries. As I say, we'll come on to this next week. But there's some big names unavailable for England, so there's that to consider too. Which we will look into in more depth. But there's some important players who are not going to be available. So, but equally, that's a massive test of our strength and depth, which we know exists in abundance.
Our strength and depth is better than any other country in the world.
Yeah. And people go, but of course it is. It should be. Well, okay, it doesn't matter whether it should be or not. It is.
Yeah, exactly. We don't give a shit whether it should or shouldn't be. It is. So, mate, it's good to be back.
It is good to be back.
It's good to be back talking rugby. I'm the same as you. Don't get me wrong. I love rugby and still been watching it and things, but I haven't been as intensely focused as I had been perhaps in the years running up after that World Cup loss. That hurt.
2015.
Well, that hurt as well.
Okay, sorry, you said the years running up.
Well, as in the years running up to this World Cup, so 2015, 2019, yes. Just everything was England rugby. Like, I literally lived my life based on England rugby. And the last few months, I perhaps have prioritised other things such as family, which is, I know, poor form. But now I am back to the England rugby status.
Good.
I hope the missus isn't listening, but I'm sure she's not. So, mate, this is awesome. I'm really looking forward to Six Nations. I'm looking forward to what, some of the players we've got in the squad, what team we're going to put out, but we will go through that next week.
Indeed. I think that the bottom line, the Six Nations doesn't matter. It doesn't have a...
Oh, it matters.
It matters to us, to you and I, and to the listeners, and to the fans, but it doesn't matter in the grand scheme of things, because we're beginning now our journey to winning the 2023 World Cup in France, and what happens over the course of the next few weeks doesn't matter. But in some ways, that's a good thing, because it means that these guys can go out there, and despite all of the sort of stuff that's going on in the background, they can go out there and they can just kind of let loose. There's not a huge amount of pressure, I guess, is the point. Which I think is a good thing, because it gives them the opportunity to just go out and maybe just put not so much the doubters externally, but if there's any doubters within the camp, it gives them an opportunity just to go, this doesn't have to matter. We are still a solid unit. We got to where we got to in that World Cup for a reason, and I wholly expect to see some great rugby from these guys, and I think that we'll come away really positive, and having sent out a clear message as to what's coming. It's going to be a massive 4 years, but a big 4 weeks before that, 5 weeks, however long it is, 6 weeks.
Or 7 weeks, whatever
7 weeks,
it is.
8 weeks, 9, yeah.
Yeah.
However long the competition lasts, I think it's about 6 weeks.
Yeah, it's exciting, guys. If you're listening, thanks for coming back. Sorry for a break, but we needed it. We needed it. It hurt.
You needed it.
I did need it.
No, not you. The listeners.
Oh, yeah.
They may not know it, but they did. They needed a break from listening to you. I mean, us.
Yeah. Well, I wouldn't argue with either one.
No, true. Guys, thanks so much for tuning back in. I'm sure that there'll be people who perhaps have given up on us, thinking that we'd given up. Hopefully you will find us again, and join us throughout the Six Nations. As we always used to say, and as we're going to say now, rate us, review us, let us know what you think. Get in touch if you've got questions, if you've got things you want us to cover. This is still a fan zone podcast. This is about you guys and what and us, and talking about what's going on with this England rugby team, and we're going to follow them as closely as we can all the way to victory in 2023. We came one result short in our last series. This series, it's about going all the way, we will be back. Don't know when yet. Some point next week, maybe even a couple of episodes next week, but we'll certainly be with you throughout the Six Nations, and we will be looking forward to it. It's rugby, it's England rugby, and it's back.
Excellent, mate. Good to be back, and we'll be back in a few days.
Catch you next week.